Hi, this is Lauren. I'm a brand ambassador for the Rabbit Hole Designs. Today I'll be using the Fiddlehead 6x6 stencil along with a new Happily Ever After wedding stamp set by Tatiana Zayats. And so what I do first is spray the stencil, one side of the stencil with pixie spray. This allows the stencil to temporarily stick to the card panel. And I'm using Bristol Smooth card panel because the Bristol Smooth can take a little bit of water better than just normal cardstock. And then I just push it onto the paper, making sure that it's all sticking. And it's a low tack spray, so it's temporary. And I'm using a 4.25, so 4¼ by 5½ inch card panel. And I'll be using some peacock green pixie powder and water. So I'll mist my paper with some water, light mist, and then I'll shake up my pixie powder so the mica gets incorporated throughout the powder evenly, so I get maximum shimmer. And then I also added a little molten gold pixie powder as well. And there's the reveal. Beautiful. You can see all those colors. A little bit of wetness there as it ran through, so I just dabbed it with a paper towel. And then I have a ton of, and there's the image I'll be using. And I already colored that up. And I am going to use the ink that is left on the stencil, because there's a lot of ink left on that stencil. Pixie powder. So I just wet the stencil again, sprayed it a little bit with my spray bottle, and then I put it ink side down onto another Bristol Smooth cardstock, and then I'm just pushing it down to make sure that all the areas of the stencil are in contact with the card base or the card panel. And then I decided to add a little bit more. So I'm going to spritz it again, and I'm adding a different color of Pixie Sparkle, and this one is Groovy Grape. So again, I just shake it up, and then I just apply, shake it on to the base, or the card panel through the stencil, and then I'm going to spritz it with some more water, and that activates the color. It just wets the powder, and then you'll see that it, just spreads around better. And activates that all up. And then I have now, because I've added more ink, I'm going to get a third piece of paper and lay that down on top. And then I'm going to just rub across the top of that paper on the back side. And what that's going to do is pick up any ink or pigment that is still on the stencil. And voila, look how much that comes up. So that could be another base to use at another time. And then here's the third base. And so I'm not going to use those for these cards, but I just thought, oh, I got a lot of ink. Why not take advantage of that? So 2 more bases you could use for other cards or projects you might do. So I'll pull back the first one. No, that's the second one. So those are there. And here's the first one again. That's the one I'll use for today's card. And I'll clean off my glass mat so I don't end up transferring any of that pigment on to my images or my card base or anything. Just clean that up. And then I had fussy cut those sweet little bunnies, bride and groom. And what I'll do, because I fussy cut those out, it leaves, you can see there's a white rim around the edge. And I am going to, on the sides of the bunnies actually. And because I had stamped that in black ink, having that white uncovered, I didn't, it's nice to have it all uniform with the black border. So I just cover that up. I use a Tombow marker to run that along the edges, covering that white. And I'm off the camera a little bit there. And so I notice here that my marker doesn't have a fine point. Something's going on with that. So it doesn't have a fine point anymore. So I'm going to grab, I have another black marker, Tombow marker. So I'll pull that in, and that one comes to a nicer point. So that will allow me to get in around the edges where the bunny feet are and the hands and some of those tight spaces. And when you are going around the edges of the images, you don't want to hold your marker on that image. You just want to slide it across to get the black on, because if you hold it on there for too long, then the black will start to bleed into your image. And after spending all that time coloring it, that's not what you want. So speaking of that, I colored these little cuties up using some colored pencils. For the clothing, I used, some shades of green. I wanted it to be a real kind of outdoorsy nature type wedding for these bunnies. So, I picture them getting married out in a field amongst all these fronds and fiddleheads and all that greenery. So I thought that fiddlehead background would be perfect for these guys. And so I used green for their clothing, their wedding attire. And then for the flowers, I used shades of pinks, soft pinks for the flowers. And for their nose and the blush and their ears, I think I used a hotter pink for their ears and for the centers of the flowers. And then warm shades of warm grays for their bunny fur. And I'm just finishing up here. And then what I will do after I've finished up with these guys is trim down my background. It's a 4.25 by 5.5 inch panel that I had created, but I wanted to have a more finished look. So I'm going to take a die from my stash that's a stitched rectangle die that's, an A2 size, which is the 4.25 by 5.5. And I'll just do that off camera and make sure that it's dry first, because you don't want to, again, transfer any of that pigment on your card base or onto the bunnies. So there I'm showing you that I'm going to be doing that, and I'll be placing it all onto, I have a top folding card base here, and that is A2 sized as well. And then I will adhere my Fiddlehead background onto the card base, and you can use whatever adhesive that you would like. I typically use a liquid glue, and the glue that I'm going to use is Barely Art glue. It's a precision craft glue, and it is great for also because it has that tiny little point for detailed die cuts, and it dries really quickly and it dries clear. So if you end up getting some on your card, then it won't show up. So I just adhere that on. And make sure it's secure. And then I'm just looking here to see where the placement will be of those bunnies. And I think I'm going to do it in a somewhat center spot. And now there's the stamp set there. It's a 3 by 4 inch stamp set with one sentiment, happily ever after. And I just love this font. It's a super font that they used. And I cut a banner from my stash using a banner die. It's a stitched banner die. And then I lined it up in my Misty and black inked the happily ever after. And I'll place that below the bunnies. And a good way to, and here I'm just going to adhere the bunnies on now using the liquid glue again. A good way to make sure that you have a straight banner. If you want a nice straight banner, is by using a ruler. You can use a T ruler to, or just a regular. I have a really great metal ruler, 6-inch ruler that works really well for lining things up and making sure, taking measurements. But you want to make sure that you get that all nice and straight underneath. And then again, I'm just going to adhere that on. So this will be a flat card, so perfect for mailing. Super sweet bunny image illustrated by Tatiana Zayat. So there I have it adhered down. And there you go. That's it. You can see the shimmer and shine from that background. And thank you for visiting. And please come back again to see more inspiration.